Alrighty, so now we're on to part 2 of the plot and structure boot camp lecture. So again, you want to make sure you have your notes out and you're taking notes on anything you don't know or that's new information for you. All right, so now we're going to move on to some other elements of plot and structure. So we're going to talk about suspense and mystery. So suspense, you guys, is the quality that increases readers' curiosity and anxiety. And both kinds of stories, commercial and literary, have this suspense. But less literary suspense tend to be like cliffhangers, which are kind of cheesy to make you like watch the next episode, right? Or buy the next book. Murder mysteries tend to have these, and love stories, tend to have these. More literary suspense tend to be stuff like not what will happen next, like will they get together? Who did it? It's more about why. Why are they behaving like this? Are they crazy? Are they in a dream? Are they being tricked? Are they living in the Matrix? Like, what's going on here? It's the why the characters are acting this way. That's what's leading to more meaningful suspense. Or how the protagonist's behavior is explained in terms of their personality and their character, right? So, what is it telling us about we human beings through them as a kind of a mirror of ourselves as human beings? Like, how is their behavior telling us something about ourselves? Okay, so it's touching on more philosophical reasoning, the why and the how rather than the what. Okay. And forms of suspense can range from very crude and obvious to very nuanced and subtle, right? They could involve actions, psychological considerations, like are they crazy, like Edgar Allan Poe stuff, moral issues, right? Like what's the right thing to do? That can create a lot of suspense, like, should they go rescue this child even though it might lead to a bunch of people dying to get to that person? Or like, I don't know if any of you guys saw gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the show that was based off a video game. It's lost me. But like everybody's like kind of after this girl because she's the cure, but somebody else is trying to rescue her to save her because she's a human being who has value. But if they don't get her DNA and experiment on her, then it might mean the death for everybody. So it's this kind of one child versus all of humanity. Like, what do you do, right? That creates a lot of suspense. You guys know what I'm talking about, probably. I'm just having a brain fart in the name. But anyway, and there's a couple of common devices that are used to create suspense: mystery and dilemma, right? So ethical dilemmas tend to create a lot of suspense, and so do mysteries. Dilemmas tend to be more on the literary. Mystery tends to be more on the commercial, though both can have both. It just depends, right? So commercial fiction often depends on suspense that might just be a mystery made out of arbitrarily leaving information out. There's no, and it's a one-time read. Once you've read it and the mystery is solved, you have no interest in going back. Your thinking's kind of stopped and you're like, oh, it was that guy. Okay, fine. And then that's that. It was just kind of fun, right? There's no hidden meaning in it. Like Scooby-Doo or a lot of M. Night Shyamalan. Not all of them, but a lot of them tend to be just kind of a one-time watch. And once the mystery's solved, it's just kind of, well, that was fun. And then you move on. And, a lot of times Agatha Christie novels can be that way, but not always. Okay, a lot of those can have a mix, right? Scooby-Doo's clearly commercial, but M. Night Shyamalan films, like, I don't know if you know him as a director, but he did The Sixth Sense, which it's a little more literary. But then stuff like Signs is a little more commercial. It's a one-time watch, and you don't really need to ever go back. It's not deep. The Village is another one. He's known for his kind of surprise endings, right? It's kind of cliched at this point, but he does have some others that are a little better. But anyway, literary fiction tends to be their suspense less about the whodunit stuff, right? And you can read it multiple times and find new things every time you've read it. Like the book's The Great Gatsby, you're going to read next year. Great Expectations is a great one that sometimes freshmen read, where there's a big mystery about who gave the character Pip a bunch of money to make him rich, and it's not clear who. And then when you do find out, you're still kind of left in suspense, but why? And then when you do find out, it's not really about who gave him the money. It's about how that money messed Pip up and ruined him. So it's more about the philosophical point, right? Surprises and surprise endings also can add to suspense. That's another trick. And surprise is proportional to the unexpectedness. So the more you don't expect it, the more surprise you get, like jump scares in horror films, right? And a radical departure can often lead to a surprise ending. And I was talking about M. Night Shyamalan. He's known for this. It doesn't always work though. Sometimes you can give too many clues and it's not a surprise, so it gets ruined. Like in the movie Signs, I'm going to ruin it. Sorry, you can hate me now. In the movie Signs, it's really obvious in the very first scene what's going to happen. You know it's about aliens coming that are scary and bad. But at the very beginning of the movie, you're just kind of seeing this quiet panning scene of a bunch of half-drinking cups of water all over the house. And there's this little girl who seems to constantly leave water cups everywhere. And I went, oh, the aliens are allergic to water. It's going to kill them. They can't have water on them. Yep. And that's not fun, right? That's not a surprise. That's like, ugh, he got too formulaic, right? But other stories like Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour, that one's super shocking. I don't think you guys read it last year, so let me spoil it for you. So here's an example of one. So Story of an Hour is very short. Takes less than an hour to read, but it's about an hour in a woman's life, and it takes place in the Civil War. And a woman gets a message that her husband's been killed in the war. And at first she's super upset, and then she starts to think about how her life's going to change, and then by the end she's kind of like relieved. And the whole point of it is to get us to kind of see like how difficult it is to be a woman in Victorian times where they have no freedom to do what they want. They're conscribed to live a certain way. You got to be a wife. You got to be a mother. You have no other options. You have to obey your husband. You're considered his property. And you're just not free. You have to kind of just take care of the house, and that's that. And so she was making a comment about that by showing how she went from being upset to kind of relieved and feeling, oh my God, I'm free. And then the surprise ending happens. Her husband walks through the front door, and she sees him and drops dead out of shock. And you're like, what? And that surprise ending is to make us show how, kind of nail that point in the story about, the horrors of being a wife, at least according to Kate Chopin at that time. She was definitely critical of the role of wife in the traditional Victorian era. So was it shocking and people lost their minds, and was it banned? You betcha. But not so much anymore. But anyway, commercial fiction tends to have more of surprise stuff than literary fiction, but Kate Chopin's considered literary fiction. So, it can be in both. It just kind of depends. And there's two ways to test if the surprise ending is legitimate and actually adding to the meaning of the story. And like, was it earned or was it contrived? Like, was it just done to write yourself just to get a jump out of somebody, like jump scares in films, right? Or was it like it makes sense and the surprise was important to understanding the meaning of the story, right? Did it have some meaningful purpose? So did it make sense in the story? Does it just feel like it was just pulled out of thin air just to, make you jump? Did it have any kind of meaning, right? Or was it to solve some kind of plot weakness, right? Because you wrote yourself into a corner, okay? All right, so moving on. So commercial stories also tend to have happy endings, and I'm sorry to tell you that most of the stories we're going to read are not happy endings, or at least mixed, complicated. Not necessarily terribly sad all the time, but not, and they lived happily ever after, like the Hallmark Channel. Nope, okay? That happily ever after fairy tale stuff, all the anxiety, all the tension is resolved, it's over, and your brain stops. With literary fiction, it tends to be left unfinished, unhappy, where the anxiety continues and it's not fully ever resolved. You're going to see that in a lot of the stories that we read. Now, why would you do that? Well, some people might feel it's really depressing, that, we want to read to escape. Life isn't that bad, but isn't it? It never ends finished and complete and well. There's an example of a story I'd like to show you by Margaret Atwood. I won't read you the whole thing, but I want to show you the beginning and kind of summarize the middle and then read you the end, okay? And it's her making a comment about why endings need to not necessarily be happy, and that happy endings aren't really true, okay? So it starts off as John and Mary meet. What will happen next? If you want a happy ending, try A. A. So A is basically a story where it says John and Mary meet, they fall in love, they have a bunch of kids, they have a great retirement, they love each other a lot, they don't get in a lot of fights, they have a great retirement, and then they die. The end. But then there's B, where she gives this all these different horrible examples of John and Mary being like John's in love with Mary, but Mary's not in love with John, and then and or vice versa, right? And there's one where John isn't in love with Mary, and Mary tries to attempts suicide to try to get attention, and then he doesn't care, and she ends up dying, and whoops, she died. And then this guy John marries somebody else, and then there's all these different examples of really sad, messed up relationships that end horribly, of people cheating and betraying each other, and it's all sad, right? And then it goes to, let me read you the end. Okay. So hopefully you can see this. I hope you can. So you scroll to the end, and if you're interested, I can let you see the whole thing. But it goes through all these different scenarios of messed up stuff, like people, getting killed in motorcycle accidents and, all that kind of stuff. But then it goes to the last part, and it says, "You'll have to face it. The endings are the same however you slice it. Don't be deluded by any other endings. They're all fake. Either deliberately fake with malicious intent to deceive, or just motivated by excessive optimism, if not by downright sentimentality. The only authentic ending is the one provided here. John and Mary die, John and Mary die, John and Mary die." So much for endings. Beginnings are always more fun. True connoisseurs, however, are known to favor the stretch in between, since it's the hardest thing to do anything with. That's about all that can be said for plots, which anyway are just one thing after another, a what and a what and a what. Now try how and why. Love it. Okay, so back to the slideshow. All right, so that's the point. It's verisimilitude, you guys. So there's 3 justifications for unhappy endings. That big fancy gigantic Scrabble word, verisimilitude, means it feels real and true to life. Okay, veritas is truth. Similitude, similar to life, right? Most people do lose, y'all. Very few people are winners. It makes us ponder why life is the way it is, helps us raise significant questions about life, keeps our minds working. Happy endings, thoughts stop. Mixed or unhappy endings, the thinking keeps going. Because we don't learn much from good luck or from winning. We learn from mistakes. That's what hubris is for all tragedies, right? Hubris means this kind of unearned arrogance that leads to their fall. Right? And that is what's tragic, is that the fall always seems to be unfair. From like one little mistake, you lose everything. Why? It seems so unfair, but that's life. Life's not fair. I'm sure you've heard that, right? And as I talked about earlier this week, pathos mythos. To suffer is to learn, and to learn is to suffer. So when you're going to get deep books, they're going to tend to be complicated, if not downright messed up and sad. Okay, so that's why a lot of our books are gonna. All right. Now, unjustified plot twists or plot manipulation can mess up a story and pull you out and lose that verisimilitude and make the story kind of fall apart through unmotivated action, or through deus ex machina, which is known as God from the machine, which is a last-minute, unearned, unconnected, arbitrary rescue. And this happens, I think, when sometimes authors write themselves into a hole and they gotta fix it, and they don't want their heroes to die, and so they get rescued like a miracle, right? Now, it can be done well, but it's hard. It tends to be really cheap. You tell me if this is cheap or not. So this is the ending of The Lord of the Rings. Sorry, I'm spoiling it. But at the end, the main characters, Frodo and Sam, have gotten the ring to fall into, well, actually a different character does it, but the ring falls into the volcano and their mission is over. And when the one ring does go into this volcano, this magical ring of invisibility, which should sound familiar to you now, melts into Mount Doom, it starts to erupt and explode. And they're trapped. They're not going to make it. They're going to die. And they're just, they're looking at each other and thinking this is it. And it's like, have you guys seen Toy Story 3? When they're going to get eaten by the trash compactor and get melted? But then guess who comes? The little aliens, the claw, and it rescues him. Ah, man, part of me thinks they should have died. It would have made such a beautiful ending, but children everywhere would cry, right? But they have their own, the claw, coming to rescue them, because they don't want the good guys to lose. These sentient, intelligent, magical, gigantic eagles come and pull them off the rock and take them home and rescue them. Now here's the problem, y'all. And Gandalf's the one that sent them, the wizard. If Gandalf knew there were giant, intelligent eagles that weren't afraid of Mount Doom, why didn't they just give them the ring to drop into it? Why did these two poor guys have to go through hell and high water to drop the one ring into the pit of the volcano? Whoops, right? So that's something a lot of people do complain, like, oh man. Now, I would say, to save it a little bit, Frodo is never rescued. He goes on to the west, which is a reference of him dying, because he's kind of destroyed by what's happened to him. He gets stabbed by the ring wraiths, and he's not going to make it. So, but Sam is rescued and has a happily ever after. So, but anyway. Now, chance and coincidence, they are okay in literary fiction. It happens in life too, right? Things, you do find the $100 bill on the ground. You do get somehow rescued by somebody. So, but it shouldn't be a crutch to solve plot problems, right? It can initiate more problems, right? And that would be fine. That would be good. It keeps the tension going, right? But if it's only to solve a problem, so you need to ask, is this chance or coincidence or deus ex machina believable, or is it too far-fetched? Does it seem cheap, or does it illustrate some aspect of the human condition? Is it a patch on your plot hole? So it's up for you to decide. Okay, so tell me in the box, what is deus ex machina, and why is it often cheap? All right, that was into part 2. Come join me for the last part 3.